don't know if we need to close that door. Are we okay? Okay, so we're going to go to 12. It's 12:33, so if one needs to give up, please feel free. 12, item 12B2, because I know I got to catch up, Dr. Phillips, because I missed yesterday, so I've got to stick to my schedule. Sorry. Section 2 is the review of the bills with active positions. So the next set of bills that Ms. Burns is going to walk us through are those that we've already taken a position on. So let's get right at it. 12B2A is AB 244.
So this bill would create the pilot program, which may include the following consultation programs utilizing telehealth and e-consult technology for pregnant and postpartum women. It would include training and toolkits on screening assessment and the range of treatment options, coordination of care for program participants, and access to perinatal psychiatric consultations for program participants. The board took a supportive amended position in order to add postpartum to perinatal and also to add psychological so that it covered the full gamut of perinatal and postpartum services that women might need in the year after giving birth. And we went ahead and communicated those amendments to the author, at which time we found out that they are not going to be pursuing it right now. It'll be a 2-year bill, so we'll be taking up those conversations in January when they take up the bill.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. Are there any comments or questions to staff regarding AB 244?
I just have a question. When you're in these discussions with staff, and specifically as it relates to telehealth and what we've learned from telehealth from a reimbursement perspective, are those part of the conversations?
No, we did not talk about reimbursement issues.
Just, food for thought is, we already know that there's existing issues with reimbursement for that.
Absolutely.
and
We can
just
bring it up in
something-
those conversations as well.
Thank you.
And more importantly, so we won't really be getting any more updates until January of 2018, which is around the corner. Unbelievable. Okay, the next item, is there any public comment about AB 244? Okay, hearing none, seeing none. The next item is AB 710, and this is about board meetings. Mr. Leitzel did this review, but Ms. Burns, if you could present for him.
So AB 710 would require the Board of Psychology to have one meeting in rural California every other year. The board had concerns about administrative concerns, cost concerns, and mandating this when the majority of our licensees don't live in the rural areas and they live in the areas that we currently hold meetings, because that's why we hold them in the 4 areas that we do, is to try and get the most public participation and licensee participation. The bill, we sent the opposed letter to the author. We will continue to send board opposed letters, and currently it is going to be scheduled for a June 26th hearing at Senate Business and Professions. We will go ahead and testify on the board's behalf and continue opposing the bill.
Thank you, Ms. Burns, and if you could also, just for clarification also, I know that staff has also been investigating other means to be able to have live participation in our board meetings. We know we have webcasts, which we know people watched yesterday as people got texts, but we also want to figure out if it's a two-way opportunity for some involvement. So thank you for that effort as well.
Yes, and we'll be initiating discussions with Solid to see what might work for our board in those opportunities. So probably not next board meeting, but maybe after that, getting a report back to you guys.
Just had a question.
Sure.
May I? How rural are some of the areas that might have been mentioned?
That's the technical concern with the bill. It doesn't define it, actually. So since you don't define it, we don't know exactly how rural you're speaking, and therefore what exactly the cost and limitations might be, especially once, if you're going to go population density-wise, where exactly would we be taking this meeting, and would the facilities there be available for us to have the board meeting and live webcasting and everything else, so.
However, it does state that it would be rural Northern California.
The northern was amended out.
Oh, it was?
Yes. So it's now just rural California.
I'm also concerned about the costs that would be entailed as a result of this, so hopefully that's something we can highlight if it moves to Senate appropriations.
We did. We highlighted the cost in our letters and to the Appropriations Committee, so.
Just one final kind of thought on this as well. There's nothing that prohibits us from having a meeting in a rural area. So that's something, if the board ever wanted to, we can investigate the most cost-effective. It's just having the mandate to have to do one meeting a year. So as I said, again, nothing prohibiting us to meeting in a rural area if the board ever so wished to do so.
Any other questions or comments about AB 710? Any public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the next item, AB 1188, and this is the Health Professionals Development Loan Repayment. We took a position at our April 21st meeting, and so, Ms. Burns, if you can give us an update on this bill, please.
Absolutely. The bill is now moved to the Senate. Right now, it's with Senate rules for committee assignment. We have sent support letters, and we will continue to send support letters as it will most likely move on to the Business and Professions Committee, and we'll testify at that hearing when it's up for hearing. So,
Thank you, Ms. Burns. Is there any comment about AB 1188? Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll move to the next item, SB 572. Ms. Burns.
and this bill would have provided a grace period. It would have prohibited Healing Arts Boards from issuing a disciplinary action or otherwise penalizing a licensee who commits a violation that does not cause irreparable harm to a consumer and is remedied within 15 days. It raised multiple concerns for staff about the ability to hold our licensees to the current statutory and regulatory licensing and ethical standards. There was also going to be significant cost to the board if every single item had to go to be determined whether or not it could cause irreparable harm. At the April 21st meeting, we took an opposed position. On May 3rd, we found out from the staff that they're no longer pursuing this bill for the remainder of this legislative session, so this bill has stopped in its tracks.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. Any questions or comments? Any public comment? And the next item and the last bill that we're reviewing that we've taken a position would be SB 798. And we took a supportive amended position on this bill. Ms. Burns.
So SB 798 is the medical board's sunset bill. So, and included in that is multiple provisions for them, but is also one provision for our board on transferring the research psychoanalyst registration program to the Board of Psychology. We had taken the supportive amended position. We asked for the delayed implementation to give us a year for the current regulations to continue on after it's transferred over to us, and then also for those fees to go to our fund and not the medical board's fund, because it would have been a bunch of fund transfers, very technical issue there. But all of these amendments were communicated with Senate Business Professions Economic Development Committee, and they were all taken. Those amendments are currently in your packet. The board staff and our legal counsel have initiated conversations with the medical board to get clarification on the current registration program and what they're currently doing with these registrants. And we'll also be researching questions related to their statutory and regulatory provisions, disciplinary issues, and code of ethics. Staff would also like to reach out to the American Psychoanalytic Association, their national association, to gather more information from them to get a better idea about the licensees. And then we would also like to go ahead and ask the board to adopt a support position. Since our amendments were taken, we can go ahead and support the bill. And also look into creating the ad hoc committee in order to get that started, that process, so we can get people on the committee and ready to go starting in the new year.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. So are there comments and questions? Thank you. This is good work in terms of taking all the concerns back, and it seems as though it went the way we'd like to go. I know that, notion of the ad hoc committee would be an important one to just follow, and so I know Dr. Phillips probably will have some perspective on that part of the conversation, but are there questions from the board members or concerns, questions, supporting the idea of us changing our position to a support position for SB 798?
Move to adopt staff's recommendation to support SB 798.
Any other board comments? Did you want to say anything, Dr. Phillips, about the ad hoc committee establishment?
We're going to actually wait till the statute has been passed so that we know that it's actually going to take place, but at that point, we'll immediately be creating a working group on this particular issue, and because staff was able to get the author's office to delay implementation of the bill, it should give us more than sufficient time within which to consider all the institutional implications.
Any other board comments, questions? Any public comment?
Dr. Joe Linder Crow, the California Psychological Association. I would like to bring the board's attention to something related to this bill. It's kind of a recent development, and that is that there is a component of the bill that would allow the medical board to get patient records without patient consent. And this, as I understand it, most commonly happens when the medical board is reviewing records for prescriptions. They go into the Cures database, and if they see patterns of over-prescribing, then they can investigate that, whether or not there's a complaint related to that. So we have recently, just this week, joined with all of the other professional associations in an opposed unless amended position on the bill, just that one, because of that one section. It's not that it affects, it's not written so that it has an impact on patients, but it could, and it might, and it probably will. And it's possible that a person's mental health records would be a part of the medical record. And so, as I said, we have joined with CMA, the California Psychiatric Association, Marriage and Family Therapists, and the other professions in opposing unless amending that one section. The medical board says they need those records in order to pursue their investigations in this area. And that sometimes it's hard to get the records, which is probably, it might be true, because records are confidential, and that's pretty sacrosanct. So I just wanted to let the board know. The CPA board on Tuesday at the board meeting did agree to an opposed unless amended position on the bill, along with the other groups that I mentioned.
Thank you, Dr. Linder Crow. Reactions to that, thoughts, questions?
We've had this issue come up before the board before in consideration of the ability to access child custody reports, I believe it was. And I think ultimately the board as it existed then made the determination that it was necessary to our enforcement function to be able to do that because we were being thwarted in too many cases. So I think we have a parallel institutional interest with the medical board, so I'm not sure that I would want to take a position on that, but I'm open to hearing what other people have to say.
So I'm glad that CPA has taken the position they have, and I think that I would tend to agree with you, Dr. Phillips, that I think we do have a parallel interest, and there may be some I mean, these are the kinds of things I think that need to be, the impact of this or the implications of this, I think, need to be, certainly thought about, certainly considered, certainly talked about and vetted, but I think, as I said, I agree with you. I think we have a parallel interest. We wouldn't want anything to impede our investigation if we had that, so.
Other thoughts or questions? Hearing none, can you call the roll for the vote on the motion on the floor? Or the motion to accept the staff's actions requested?
I'm sorry.
So if you turn to that first page, it's the action requested on there. So it recommends that the board adopt a support position of SB 798 as the board's requested amendments have been incorporated into the bill and begin the process of establishing an ad hoc committee for research analysts.
Oh, no, I'm not, I'm thinking about something else. You said that, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Did you have any question, Ms. Okoye-Bodu?
No, no, I was just,
Okoye-Bodu?
no.
Bernal?
Aye.
Erickson?
Yes.
Fu?
Aye.
Horn?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
Phillips?
Aye.
And that passes.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. So that concludes that section that was of all the active bills. So we're going to move down again on the agenda to C. Dr. Horn?
I'm wondering if we can go back to B for one. I just have a question about 12B3EE. So it's AB 1074. So I understand we're watching it.
Go ahead.
So my question is this. Is there some sort of oversight? I don't understand what this bill does, I guess, and so I'm not sure what we're watching, and that's what it's just for clarification for me. Thank you.
As you see in the bottom, and I'll let staff add if they want to, the action request at the bottom, it's to just monitor the effects on oversight of applied behavior analysis providers.
And right now, this is cleanup of some of the provisions that are currently in legislation.
Is there oversight? That's what I'm asking.
There currently isn't additional oversight provided by this bill.
There is or is not?
It's not adding additional oversight, it's just cleanup of those measures regarding applied behavioral.
Is there oversight of applied behavior?
There is not.
No.
Okay.
There's no regulation, but they did amend the bill to require fingerprints for individuals that are going to be providing the services. So that was one thing that they did. Or was that another
Yeah,
ABA
it's the
bill?
other ABA
It's
bill.
the other ABA, okay, my confusion,
It's okay.
okay.
I know, in my head, I lump them together as well, but
But there is no bill that currently is asking for oversight or regulation of the profession.
so this one is
So
just a
what does
cleanup
this
measure on
do?
these.
It's a cleanup measure on what? That's what I'm
It's
asking.
requiring different supervision of these paraprofessionals, so it's just changing some of the supervision requirements on these folks, essentially. It's nothing that we're looking for in the area of area of oversight right now, so we're continuing to watch it, but it's mostly cleanup for them.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm confused as well. So they've created statutes regarding people that are certified autism providers or whatever the qualified autism service professionals. What agency administers this function?
Sorry, say that again?
What agency administers this function? Is there an agency this has all been assigned to?
No. A lot of these functions are dealing with reimbursement and then regional centers that they're working with. So a lot of this is kind of how these all interrelate and work together and who can provide what services and be paid for them. So
In the last legislative session, there was a question about extending the sunset for providing reimbursement for the qualified autism service providers. They eliminated the sunset provision, and now reimbursement is happening for all these individuals. Side by side with that was the bill that was the 2-year bill to provide oversight and regulation. That bill died. We expressed our concerns both in our legislative meetings in February and during the legislative session last year, that we felt a lack of consumer protection was happening with there not being oversight to these individuals. One of the concerns we did relay was the lack of fingerprint and background being collected and maintained for the people that were providing services in homes to the children that were receiving some of the services. So that was the other bill, and that was amended into the bill. It is another watch bill, but at this stage, we don't anticipate or know of any additional effort to regulate the practice.
So staff is just continuing to watch all the related bills.
Generally, we're going to be watching to see if there's anything that diminishes, is what we're coming from. So when we say we're watching about this oversight, we're generally concerned on this bill and others that we don't want any diminishing of the oversight that's already there, which is already pretty minimal. So if that helps frame it in a different way, so.
It may be my ignorance of state government, but I don't understand. Okay, so they send for a fingerprint report and it comes back. Who's looking at the fingerprint report?
It's going to be those employing agencies.
Oh, so it's going to go back to a regional center or?
Yeah, and
okay.
those people contracting with those companies. So that company would have to do the background check, and then those that are contracted with them would know that those people have to be background checked. So
Okay.
it is a very diffused system, but
Very.
yeah, there is no central state agency for that.
Okay, so are there any other questions because we did go through the watch bill section quickly, but is there anything else? Thank you for bringing that question, Dr. Horn. Is there anything else that anyone else saw? And since we went back to this section, I'll just ask, is there any public comments related to any of the bills that are in the watch list that haven't been discussed? Okay, so we'll move to C. And again, I know that we keep this on our radar to get an update, which we do have an update to share. So I'll let you share the update on CANRA, please, Ms. Burns.
So as requested at the last board meeting, we've included some of the more historical information. That way we kind of have a kind of dialogue chronology here of things that have occurred on this issue. Of course, on April 6th, the Office of the Attorney General advised that their office will maintain the suspension on our request for an opinion. And then we were notified that on May 10th of this year, the petition to review the case was granted by the Supreme Court, so it will go up for review by the Supreme Court. So, of course, we will continue waiting for a decision on that before we can initiate whether or not we need that opinion from the Attorney General. So, unfortunately, still stuck in the waiting pattern, but at least we now know the Supreme Court has granted review, and so we'll go ahead and wait for that.
And I know that as we prepare for the meeting, staff says that they're sorry, they have nothing else to report, but they are reporting all that they have, so they have no need to be sorry. We appreciate the continued update, actually. Is there any public comment or board comment about the update on CANRA? So continue to be an agenda item, and thank you very much at both the committee and the board level. So thank you so much. The next item is the regulatory updates. There's 2 of them. So we're 12D.
And so the psychological assistant package is the one that's in the initial review stage. So that's obviously kind of the informal part where the board is reviewing it, and then also it goes through a DCA review process before it goes to the Office of Administrative Law. So currently, the regulatory package is being reviewed by staff. It has gotten a preliminary legal review, and we will address those concerns After that point, it will be sent to DCA for DCA's review process, which includes everything, including budgets and agency and so on, before it goes to the Office of Administrative Law. The one package that is in the formal rulemaking process is the verification of experience and supervision agreements forms. That package was actually approved by the Office of Administrative Law on June 5th, and the order of adoption is part of your hand carry. They're also over on the side table. It will be effective on October 1st of this year, and currently staff is working on regulatory advisories and information to disseminate to licensees and the public regarding this regulatory package. So you'll be hearing more in the newsletter, advisories, and so on about this package. So that one is complete and in the books.
Great job. Any comments or questions from board members? Any public comment about the regulatory update? Okay, hearing none, that concludes the report that I have from the Policy and Advocacy Committee.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. And I just wanted to say, and I was reflecting on this as I'd gone through the board package last week, that between staff and central services, our senior management, and the committee, it is remarkable to me how far we've come in this area. Because I can recall being an observer at Board of Psychology meetings maybe 5 or 6 years ago, where literally 15 minutes would be devoted to a committee discussing things, and that was about all the action that was taken. We have become, I think, a very efficacious agency or board when it comes to taking positions on legislation and even sponsoring legislation. And I just wanted to give a shout out to the committee and to staff and to management for the remarkable turnaround in this area and how important this function is to us as a board.
And thank you, Dr. Phillips, and I forgot to say thank you, Dr. Erickson. We have a wonderful committee, and Mr. Glass-Steagall and Mr. Connor have been helpful, and Ms. Burns, thank you so very much. And Mr. Glass-Steagall, I just appreciate the legislative update, and I want to acknowledge, this came up during our meeting in April about trying to make sure we look at trends and organize the watch bill cover memo, and staff has been super busy with all the bills they're watching. The catchment is huge, and they said, well, we'll do that in fall, and they did it initially for this one. So I just want to acknowledge the responsiveness and the hard work that's being done. So thank you very much, and thank you, Ms. Zorick, and Ms. Marks, because she's super helpful too when we get to the point of we don't understand what the legal stuff means. So thank you so much.
We're going to continue to take things out of order, and I did not have an opportunity to warn the chair of this committee of this particular change in the agenda. But I'm trying to allocate the time out so we can break at about 11:45 approximately, so people will have an opportunity to check out. After lunch, we're going to be coming back to closed session, which will give other people an opportunity to take a longer lunch break. But for now, I would like to turn our attention to outreach and education. Ms. Bernal, I did not have an opportunity to warn you about this, but
Well, you especially threw me off as you were looking over towards your left. I was really like, who's next? You could have given me a little heads
I
up
know.
on my way.
It was a fake, and it worked.
You wanted to see if I was awake. Thank you. So, we are now on our section 17. And I may be a little out of order, so Ms. Burns, if you could, I took things out of my book and now I'm struggling to put everything back in. But our first agenda item is updates, correct, to our strategic plan. And specifically, I think the most significant items that have changed, right, are on pages 4 and 5. And it's related to, our retired status for licensed psychologists. Those agenda items have been moved to second quarter of 2018. Is that correct? questions on that? Ms. Sorick, is there anything else that significantly stands out? So, point is, we're on track and keeping everything.
I have a question, Ms.
itemized.
Bernal.
Sure.
In terms of, on page 2, I know since we've had to update the videos, what is the timetable for updating some of those?
Ms. Sorick?
The videos have been taken off, given changes to the verification of experience regulations, as well as a couple of the provisions of the Practice Act that were made during our sunset bill. The staff is working with Office of Public Affairs, given both of the workload of both offices. We're trying to be mindful of that and also trying to time it with pathways. There may be an opportunity where we can develop an interim video. I know it was something that was viewed quite frequently, something that was helpful to applicants. It is our goal to get something up as soon as possible. It may be that we wait until pathways, until we do the videos. So it's in flux at this stage, but our hope is to get something up soon.
And I have 2 more questions. On page, first is more of a comment, well, it's a question and a comment. On page 3, in that section about establishing communication tools, I know that we have until the Q4 2017, the ongoing visits to schools to educate students and trainees on the process. And so I just wanted to just say, I don't know what the plan is about that, but I also feel like, I just share from my experience, again, going as a public member, I just feel like it's important that in terms of the visits to the schools, perhaps board members can be a part of that. So that's the comment part of it, but wanting to know what the plan is. And then the last comment I have is on page 6 about establishing a stronger relationship with consumer groups. And that was to be completed Q2 2017. I know that efforts have been made about getting the database, but I feel like today, in this meeting, both days, there's been a comment about explaining complaint processes. And so I think that in terms of that plan of the outreach to consumer groups, I think this is an important area that we can focus on at some point.
And I do just want to point out, during our pathways discussion, one of the things that we really wanted to make sure and do is reach out to not only the professionals, but as well as the consumer organizations. So we have a large list of consumer groups and consumer advocates that were sent an invitation to attend the stakeholder meeting on the changes to the pathways to licensure. We didn't have any attendees, but we did reach out and invite those folks.
And Ms. Jones, your points are well taken, and from an education, we're definitely coming up with material to include in our newsletter, so thank you. Moving on to any other comments, questions? Agenda item B, Ms. Sorick, would you please give us a communications plan update?
Sure. Included in the meeting materials is a communications plan update. This was a byproduct of this board strategic plan. It looks at the tools and ways in which we communicate to our stakeholders. I did highlight a move to Q2 of 2017 for creating and maintaining the targeted list of stakeholders. That is something that Mr. Leitzel is working on. And that was the only change to that plan.
And I think you said Q2, but it's actually Q3 of 2007?
Q3, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. Now, as it relates to our board's section, agenda item C, our board's use of social media. Ms. Burns, would you like to give us an update on this?
Absolutely. So currently we have 396 likes on Facebook, and our most popular since the last board meeting was already taken education and training in suicide assessment and intervention, no problem. ABA 89 doesn't require additional training. -ed for more information, go here. On Twitter, we have 229 followers, and we're following 377. Board meetings, if you look at the webcast, of course, February 9th's meeting was a very popular day. Again, when we have interesting commentary, public comment, petition hearings, we do tend to have higher views. We don't currently survey how or why you're coming to view the video, but we do notice that's the trend. So the more exciting days of testimony or hearings or presentations, high views 714, the next day 133. So, February 9th, you had the public testimony or public comment on child custody evaluations. You also had a petition hearing. There was one other thing on the first day. Wasn't there?
I think it was very much
The
the
child
child custody and
custody,
the
so-
invites that those groups did in the outreach.
I thought there was one more thing, but it's probably eluding me at the moment, so. But continuing on, the YouTube videos, of course, are down until they are revised, and then there is graph data on our Facebook and Twitter followings.
Thank you. And moving on to agenda item D, our website update. Ms. Burns?
So this is following our typical website update. We will talk a little bit later on how we're going to be changing this up potentially. Currently, the homepage, of course, gets the most views. Also in our top views, the psychologist application page, overview of licensure, our laws and regulations, and the licensee and registrant information page. So those graphs are provided as well. Again, those are all pulled by whenever they're pulled for a meeting, so that's why they're not in any sort of sequential every 3 months, 2 months, 1 month sort of event. Any questions?
And agenda item E, we've talked again about working together with Solid, correct, on the userness of our board's website.
And we have discussed with Solid and their management, Mr. Zanke, and that's to do a user-friendliness survey and then also focus groups, one in the Northern California area and then one in Southern California, to look at the user-friendliness of our website and updating our website to make it as user-friendly as possible. We are working with Solid currently to do the licensing committee's pathways regulatory review stakeholder group process. So our user-friendliness focus group is being pushed to 2018 instead of this year, so that Solid can work with us on the pathways first and get that through the process, and then we'll go ahead and start next year with the user-friendliness.
Are we targeting a specific quarter in 2018?
No, we would start off in January, working with them to create the surveys and send those out, and then to do the focus groups after that. So presumably somewhere in the quarter 2 and quarter 3 would be the estimated time for a stakeholder group, and then reporting back out at quarter 4. That would be the hope.
Thank you. Any questions? Agenda item F is, this was a hand carry item.
Actually, I do have a question. I'm sorry, Ms. Bernal. I'm just going back to what Ms. Sorek just said about the invitation to the Pathways meetings with stakeholders, and that some of the groups did not attend. I just feel like as we look at this in terms of trying to get those groups, I don't know, I just want to say it out loud, I guess, that maybe that's something we have to be mindful about, or how we go about doing that, because if we're not getting them, either there's not interest or there's not a rapport relationship developed. What does that entail? So anyway, I just, that struck in my head about the fact that if they were invited, and that was our goal, to try to do more outreach to that community in terms as part of stakeholders, then we might be missing a group. Why is that?
Well, I would think though, too, if we have, I mean, if you're sending something out with a very specific request to return, right? If you're working with a focus group, then there's that continuity of like, follow up and because you're working with, Solid would be working with us on this, correct?
I guess my concern would be just getting them to say agree to be a part of that, right? That was my thought.
Well, you're making a specific ask at this point, as opposed to just like creating an awareness or, reaching
Right.
out is what I'm thinking, but please feel free.
I was just going to say the means by which we've been trying to communicate with the stakeholders is we send them a letter and then we follow up by phone call. In the case of Pathways, it was Ms. Lim that sent the letters out on behalf of Dr. Horn, and then we followed up with phone calls and emails to encourage attendance. So it wasn't just that we communicated in one way and then didn't hear back and didn't follow up.
And know that that's not my thought. It just was like, the fact is, was there a response? And they said no. I'm just thinking about, as we talk about trying to tap into groups and get feedback from them, just figuring out if, and I know the staff is doing something, but if there's not a responsiveness there, anyway.
I think actually the experience was that there was one mental health group that did say that they would be attending. They did not actually attend. And I think probably, my best guess, and it's a fairly educated guess, is that had to do with the subject matter. I think we'd probably get more responsiveness with different subject matter, but because it was the licensing process, it tended to pull mostly the licensees, training directors, those types of folks who are actually involved actively in that process. I think other people would probably find it incredibly boring. We find it very interesting, but so hopefully as we change around on subject matter, we'll have better, I'm hoping we'll have better response.
Thank you for that description, and I just feel like, there's a two-step process listed here too, but just to ensure that we get 40, that we might have to do more outreach to get that group is all I'm thinking, and so but I do agree with you. Thank you for saying that to me, Dr. Phillips, also, because you're right. Given the subject matter of Pathways, there would be a certain interested group in mind, but just a sense that we don't want these 40 people just to be the same people that came to Pathways, for instance. That's just my thought.
Any other comments on item 17E? No? Ms. Burns, would you, agenda item F, could you please elaborate?
Absolutely. So this item is kind of a, how should we be communicating to the full board about our website? Currently, as you've seen in the previous update, you get the top 5 and you get graphs on whatever's in the top 5, and that's whatever the top 5 sites are that people are accessing. So staff had the question and concern of maybe we should be reporting on what we're trying to outreach and educate licensees and the public about, and be monitoring more of what the board is concerned about that information getting out and whether people are accessing it. Obviously, we can always use Google Analytics to track just about, well, not just about everything, because it does have its own limitations, but many things. But would this be a more advantageous way of reporting out to you on what people are accessing? Are they getting the messages we're trying to send? And what we're trying to get out to the public, are people accessing it? So during the March Outreach and Education Committee, we discussed the merits of tracking particular web pages over time, and also, but not losing, the top 5. So you'd still get the numbers on the top 5, but not a bunch of charts and graphs on the top 5, because those obviously, if things come on, they fall off, it kind of, the data points aren't as helpful for you. So you'd still get your snapshot of the top 5, but then that we would start doing a quarterly reporting on the usage information for these particular websites, and kind of taking a look at these items could come on, come off. So looking at the board's quarterly newsletter, are people accessing our newsletter? Are people going to the continuing education page? We had hoped to do the verify a license, except for that's a link actually on our page to a DCA page, so we can't actually track that, unfortunately. So, because you would get everybody's numbers. It would look astronomically huge, because it'd be all the boards on Breeze. Our laws and regulations page, how often are people going to that? Are people going to our filing a complaint page to figure out information on filing a complaint? Our applicant information page, which usually is part of our top 5, but obviously that's an important one for us. Who's looking at coming into the field and the requirements. The disciplinary actions page, obviously, that's a pretty big catch for most people. They like to read that news. And then also having other special focuses come on and off of this list that we would track, such as pathways. Once it's actually in the formal process and there's pages for it, how often are people going to look at it? Are they going to make the public comment? When we create a psychological assistant supervision page, are people accessing that supervision information? Is it getting a lot of looks and views? As we develop a military and military spouse information page that has all the information for military and military spouses, are people going to that page? Right now it's diffuse over our website. Our plan is to make one page where you can get all the information. Once that's available, are people utilizing it? Is it making it easier for them? So these were the recommendations. The committee discussed it. The committee agreed that these would be good websites to track. And so what we've done is also provide you with a sample of what it would look like. So you'd see on our newsletter page, we did the actual page, so it has multiple newsletters on it. And that one, Q1, you had 807 views. So obviously these are going to be smaller because these are not your most popular pages, but it's good to know how many times we're going. And that actually shows us people are going to that general page. They're searching through our old newsletters as well. And Q2, that number's a little lower, but we're midway through in the reporting part. For the most recent newsletter, it's a lot smaller, but you got to remember when those come out, it's at the end of a season. So you're going to see a spike right after it gets published, and then it goes back down. So we can track both the newsletter page, how many times are people coming to our newsletter page and searching through our newsletters, and then also the most recent one, which will have a spike and then it'll drop and then it'll go back and forth. Our continuing education page, 4,000 views in Q1, so that's a pretty good number right there. Not sure why it's twice, but that's just a little technical error there. And our laws and regulations page, if you notice on Q1, you have 21,756. Laws become effective generally January 1. So you're going to have a lot more people looking. What laws changed? What do I need to know? Oh, is your laws and regs book available in PDF? Are people going there to download it? So you'd see a very big spike in the first quarter and then a lot less throughout the year, but you'll still see a lot of views, 5,911. That's still pretty good. Filing a complaint page, 1,842, and then you're getting pretty similar to Q2. So you might see kind of a stable trend for that page and how many people are accessing it. Obviously, one of our more popular pages, the applicant information page, you're getting 62,000 views in one quarter. You're going to get a lot of looking at that, looking at the requirements. How do I do this? What do I need? Those kind of questions. Disciplinary actions, still a pretty high number. Obviously not as much as applicant if you put it next to that, but this would kind of give you the idea. And then once those other pages are up, are people accessing this new information on pathways? Are they accessing the military information? That way we can kind of track, is the information the board is trying to get out being viewed, rather than just what's the most popular at any one point in time, and if it falls off and on, we don't really keep track of that. So it's our recommendation to move to this method, and that way your reports in the future would have the top 5 snapshot and then these kind of web pages, and we would update those over time, and the committee would report out that way.
Well, I just love this and want to thank you, even though I'm part of the committee.
I love it too.
But I do, what it does show, people are using our website, which is really nice to see. I mean, they're using it for specific reasons, and even as I read through this, they're using it for the reasons we would really think we'd want them to be accessing it. So that, this is just great information. I'm really glad that y'all are going to start providing this. Then we can start seeing, as new information comes on, just like you said, are people accessing that, and maybe what we need to change. And this is even, I think, with a website that's hard to navigate, so
Right.
it's not easy. It's not user-friendly, so this is really great. So just wanted to make that comment.
I would second that, but the one thing that does strike me about the statistics, and I think it's important that we've reinstituted the newsletter, so I'm completely supportive of the newsletter. But we often rely on the newsletter to educate the licensees, and we're not getting, it's clear that a large number of licensees aren't looking at the newsletter. So I think we want to keep that in mind when we talk about our education efforts for licensees to have as multimodal a distribution system of that type of information as possible.
Dr.
Are the newsletters sent hard copy to all the licensees as well?
They are sent electronic to all licensees. There's a
Okay.
small group that get the newsletter hard copy as well.
Okay,
Anyone could request the hard copy, but it does not go out hard copy to
okay,
everyone.
but everybody gets it electronically?
Yes.
And so people may not be going to the website. Oh,
The
well,
other-
that would be the
It would send them
link.
to the
Yeah,
website, and that
okay.
link would be tracked.
Okay,
The other thing would be, our listserv has it's not a very splashy HTML version. It comes out as a plain text email. We have discussed, instead of sending, this is our newsletter, is maybe trying to make the email subject line a little splashier, and then putting the table of contents in the email. That way, you would see in the email whether or not you want to click on the link. Currently, it's just here's our newest newsletter, and here is the link. Well, that may not entice somebody enough as where if the article's titles are in the email, that might encourage them to press on that link more often than just a, hey, our newsletter's out, and they're like, well, maybe I'll go look at it later. But if they see that newsletter article about the pathways discussion or the change in CPD regulations, that might encourage them to press on the link and go view that more often.
Ms. Jones, you had a question?
And I was going to say, Dr. Phillips, I think you're absolutely right. This helps gives us, I love the format, and I've been asking about the newsletter, so I'm excited about it. And I, like you, Dr. Phillips, I'm happy that we have it back. I'm just wondering, too, this could be the tool that we utilize if we're not getting people to go to certain things. Maybe that's where the multimodal process comes in. The social media could then link people back, and then we could see how effective that process is, because people are inundated with lots of different things, but if there's something like making it splashy or whatever, or really like pulling it out for folks, might be a helpful way. But I think that the way this is set up helps us to see where should we be doing more emphasis or something like that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to add, Ms. Burns, thank you. This looks amazing. But maybe for our next board meeting, if we could still also include, like right now we have obviously first quarter, we're into quarter two, 6 out of 8 months? Is this kind of how that reads? It says 6, 8.
That's the date. June 8th is when the data was
Okay, I'm
pulled.
sorry. So if we could, though, have it like quarter over quarter, and then we show like where we are currently for our next board meeting, that'll also be very helpful.
Yeah, each board meeting, you'd get a quarterly update, and it would have the whole year in the view. And that way,
Okay.
every year in your November meeting would have essentially the full year's, well, almost the complete full year's view. So that way, you'd have a recap every year of how we're doing. And I think that can allow staff better to go back and look at those things. Currently, when we're only reporting on the top 5, things pop on, they pop off. Whether or not they're important enough to reach that high, we're not sure. And then if you're never in the top 5, we're not getting a lot of time to sit and analyze and think about those things.
Thank you.
So.
Any other comments? No?
Comment. I'm curious, how quickly do we get things on the website? Who makes the changes? If we have a news flash of some sort, does that take a day or a few weeks? Do we know?
Well, normally we try to give, because it's their timeline, a week for something to be posted online, because the internet team does it for all DCA boards. I believe there's only a couple of boards that have their own staff doing their website. So we usually give them a week, but if there's urgent things, we can ask for a quick turnaround. We do try to limit that request so that we're not constantly asking for urgent requests. That would become burdensome on them. But usually it's about a week. It can be
Okay.
sooner, though.
It's helpful to know. Thanks.
Agenda item G is an update on our newsletter. Ms. Sorek?
I just want to give a shout out to the publications unit who did a quick print job and got us some nice hard copies of the newsletter printed in time for the board meeting today. It should be posted any day now on our website, and once it is, we will do as we always do in sending it out to all of our licensees, as well as sending it on social media. And we will do the new format of sending out the table of contents when we send that message out. I think it's a great journal. I don't know if you've all had a chance to review it, but it's definitely one that looks really good.
Thank you. And from an education perspective, I know Dr. Horn is very excited about writing a couple of articles on things that we've heard during this yesterday and today's board meeting. So we've got some good content.
Thank you for being my partner and soliciting great articles.
Thank you. And agenda item 17H, Ms. Sorick, could you give us an update on the outreach activities?
Included in the meeting materials is an update on the outreach activities that we have done in the last fiscal year. The only thing I wanted to make sure and add to this is for future requests or future outreach. I have extended an invitation to Dr. Belovich, who was originally going to present from the LA County jail system on access to mental health. He will be at our San Diego meeting in November. So we're very excited to have him come to our upcoming meeting. And no other items to report.
Thank you.
I just want to give a quick update, actually, since we have our wonderful staff watching. The newsletter is up on the website as of yesterday afternoon, and it will be sent out.
Thank you. Agenda item I is a hand carry item dated June 8th. Is that correct? Yes. Our update on outreach plan for high schools, community colleges, state and university systems to increase the licensing population. Ms. Burns, could you please give us an update?
Absolutely. So this was originally presented at the November board meeting, and there was some concerns expressed by the board and the public about the unnecessary duplication of effort, since the American Psychological Association already has a campaign and toolkit for psychologists to use to encourage students to enter the field of psychology. There were also concerns that the campaign needs to come from a regulatory perspective. There was suggestions that the plan could focus on communicating reasons why people should be interested in the profession and informing them of the general educational costs, application timeframes, and so on. So at the March Outreach and Education Committee, we took a look at this and we had a discussion about revising the goals and the direction of the plan with a regulatory perspective in mind, and changing the direction of the plan to how the plan could interact with schools and colleges while considering staff time and resource limitations that currently exist for the board, including limited external partnerships. Per the committee's direction, the revised goal of the campaign for consideration for the board today would be to inform students of the broader opportunities and benefits of pursuing a doctoral degree in psychology and eventually licensure as a psychologist. This would include highlighting the reasons that students continue their education past a master's degree. There was a great discussion on trying to get people to see the benefits of getting past the master's degree. Why continue on? Why keep pursuing, especially with additional costs? And the limitations that come with licensure as at a master's level profession. And that sometimes the committee talked about, what's internally known within the field may not be exactly what the general public sees. So they may not be seeing the kind of limitations that might occur when they're in a master's level provider as compared to being a licensed psychologist. So the extra opportunities that are available to them and those specialties that are available to them. In particular, the campaign would highlight distinctions between what services, diagnostics, tests, specialties, and employment opportunities are available to psychologists that are not available to master's level providers. And the committee discussed that for many individuals, that distinction may not be clear. And I've actually run into it in my personal life as well, where someone is now licensed at the master's level profession and wishes they had continued on. And so it's something that maybe isn't always clear to them at that time, and they make those decisions then, and then they look back and wish they had proceeded through to the doctoral level and licensure. And so we'd also, upon approval of the new goal and direction, we'd be working on redesigning the actual plan with the new goals and direction in mind. We'd also be reaching out to different psychological specialties and their professional associations as potential partners, and developing an implementation plan with deliverables and a timetable for board consideration at a later time this year. And so we were requesting that you approve the new goal and direction of the plan, and then we will continue on with creating an implementation plan with specific deliverables.
Yes, Dr. Horn.
I want to clarify something, at least just how I'm reading it. I think the emphasis was less on the limitations at the master's level and more on the added benefits, I'm going to say, of pursuing the doctoral degree. And I think that's how we have to
Switch the perspective.
Correct. We did talk about that, yes. Mr. Fu, did you have a question?
What's the considered reasonable performance outcome of the adoption of this plan? So based on this outreach, are we looking to benchmark a 5%, 10% increase in applications, or 10% increase in folks pursuing a doctoral program? Is that going to be factored into that, or is this a general outreach discussion item that staff will develop?
I believe it was because we had come across an article, correct, that there were especially in minority communities, that there was limitations on the access to licensed psychologists. Is that correct? Or PhDs? And so we found that they were going, the demographic of a typical psychologist was that they were going into more affluent areas, correct, to go more into private practice.
So with the final report, or after the adoption of the staff's recommendation, if adopted, would that also then include some examination then of potentially breakdown of if we're seeing an increase in applications or increase in pursuit to reflect the article's statement that there was not enough outreach or not enough folks interested
Well, again,
in
I mean,
that?
the goal is to also try to encourage more diversity in the field of psychology, correct? And so while we could come up with some kind of benchmark, I'm not quite sure if it's more related to at the university level where you see the spike. Is that correct, Ms. Sorick?
Yes.
Or Ms.
Oh.
Okwebadu? I mean, you're on the committee as well, so.
Yes, in alignment, when we or as we get data, then we will have enough to look at and to see, because we now know that it's woefully not enough folks going into psychology, and particularly people of color. And so now, as we move forward with a united, focused plan to start introducing psychology, as Dr. Horn has said, in a different kind of way, then we will generate enough data. So now we can look and have a conversation about that.
Yes, I just wanted to add one quick thing. And Mr. Fu, also additional food for thought is that licensed social workers and masters, I believe, in psychology could work in minority communities, but again, they're not at the PhD level.
Right.
And that was the other part of it, if I recall correctly, was that then they are, it's a different level of expertise from a clinical perspective, correct? Thank you.
And just to add a little wrinkle, it's complex because it's much more expensive generally to complete your doctorate than it is to complete your master's. And so that's a piece of it, of where people end up as well. The student loans they have to pay back and stuff, so.
And
complex. We have a lot of.
Really quick, I just wanted to mention that typically, and we've only done one campaign since I've been with the program, but that was kind of an access to mental health care. So we did newsletter articles, we had guest speakers, we had Health Professions Education Foundation give a presentation on their loan repayment. We put an article together about which loan repayment programs that people can apply to. The gathering data or the after part, which totally makes sense. I'm a numbers person too. However, demographic and ethnic data is not something we currently collect. We don't have the legal authority to do that. So we would create an awareness and an outreach, but it's not something that we would be able to have a benchmark and then show any kind of numbers-driven result from. Not to put a Debbie Downer on the situation, but that's the hope, but we won't know.
And I would suggest with this campaign as compared to our 2-year campaign, that the data would be, you wouldn't see results until many years further down the road. So a lot of this might be more measured in the ways that staff can measure this, as into who's accessing the campaign materials, how many schools have we reached out to, those kind of measures as compared to the longer-term outrun or outcome data.
Ms. Jones?
So, I think it's an excellent question. You start backwards planning, think of the outcome first and go backwards. And I was trying to think, like, how would you measure that? And then part of me also thinks, in terms of the information that we would be providing, it seems as though, I'm of two minds here, because I do feel like there's lots of efforts to do the earlier outreach to high school and community colleges. However, both of those institutions don't get to the PhD level anyway. So the group that you're really focusing on are the folks that are stopping at the BA or the master's level, right? And so, so part of me just feels like, even in terms of who would be the target to get the information, is it the high school students? Is it the counselors? Is it staff? And so I feel like I like the plan. I think it's needed. I think much like access to healthcare in general, healthcare is an important pursuit. I know at the community college level, there's been a lot of talk about guided pathways and getting people into careers. I just don't know how would we operationalize this over a 2-year period of time, I think is what we're looking at. And even what would we be targeting those materials in what way? So.
And I would just also differentiate between the 2-year campaign, which is a different one. So that similar to the other outreach campaign, there will be a 2-year campaign on enhancing diversity and cultural competency. That will be separate campaign, and this would be kind of a campaign that has ongoing materials and efforts. So I don't know that there's a set limit on it being a 2-year campaign, or if this would be an effort the board has and continually refreshes and improves on, so.
Dr. Aguirre?
Go ahead. I was just thinking,
Ms. Aguirre, sorry.
continue to cast the broad net and see what we get. That was my understanding as we were meeting. And you all have raised some excellent points that as we move forward in our meeting, we will see what this looks like and perhaps make that differentiation or move it forward. But one thing, and let me just thank the committee and all of you all for this, that you're moving forward with it. And we really appreciate that. So I just wanted to say that. And I think it's being taken seriously, it's being done well, and that's a good thing for psychology, I think. So.
Agreed, and also it's ongoing efforts is the key word. And
Yes.
Ms. Jones, you were going to say something else?
And I appreciate that, thank you, because I was looking here again at the action requested, and I get that some of those questions I'm asking would be approved at a later date. I just feel like, for me to wrap my head around the idea, I'm thinking kind of like you, Mr. Fu, already down the line, evaluation, what does that look like? And so that's where I was saying, I think that it's not just that article, I think it is the fact of the matter, right? I mean, it's not one article, it's research that has shown that many communities don't have the same access, which is part of the work of health professionals education fund anyway, to make sure that they can support folks doing that work. So, I would just say, so it makes me think also about the collaborative nature of this type of effort. I would think that we would be trying to tap into what HPEF is doing to see about duplication of efforts, or how do we leverage, because I think that it is a big, huge something. So Mr. Fu's comment about what we would measure is an important one.
It is. Thank you, guys.
And those are part of our conversations as well.
Thank you.
So do we need to move this into motion for you all to authorize this, or, I'm not sure.
I think because it hasn't been fully
Because it's not a plan.
developed yet, with all the steps and timetables, I would say let's go ahead and bring this back to the next board meeting, or
I think we were just trying to
next
get
committee meeting.
approval of the direction and goals where we're heading before we go and make a plan. And
Got it.
because last time I think we had a one-shot deal, and we found out that was too fleshed out and it wasn't in the right direction. So now go back to the drawing board. Let's find the new direction, then let's make the plan according to that direction. So if we're comfortable with this direction, we can make an implementation plan, deliverables, that kind of a deal. If that's okay.
We would bring a draft to the board
Yes,
for ratification
exactly.
at a later date, if
And then
this
they would approve
direction
that.
is correct, yeah.
Okay.
Do you have enough sense of the board's sentiment at this point to move
I think
forward?
I do.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so that doesn't
Thank
require
you.
a motion.
No.
We're actually going to have to take our break now. It's now 11:45. Some people need to check out of the hotel. We will return to this at a later point in time. So for board members, anybody's welcome to come back at 12:45, but we're going to be going immediately into closed session to discuss some disciplinary matters. So I would suspect you'd be safe in coming back 20 or 30 minutes after that, because there's probably some discussion that needs to be had among the board members. We can't guarantee that we're going to go back into session shortly after 1 or at 1:15, but that would be the best estimate. I would certainly recommend staff be back here by 1. Then we'll go back, we'll complete Ms. Bernal's report. We have other agenda items to cover, and I know that Mr. Fu might have had an additional comment to make on the outreach campaign. Oh, okay. So- We haven't had public comment yet on this, so we will, on all of this, yeah. So we will come back at board members, 12:45, staff members, 1 o'clock, members of the public, whenever you'd like to come back.
Well, we did cover this, you want me to read? We did read it and with changes and.
Oh,
comment.
public comment at the end. Is that what you're going to do?
Well, we were going to go through them and then go through public comment at the end, correct? Okay, so we're on to agenda item 17J. Oh, wait, we did.
Yeah.
We did,
We did I, so we're on J.
okay, Jay. Well, Ms. Burns, would you please give us an update?
Absolutely. So this is for consideration of our next 2-year plan, outreach and education campaign. Recently, the board completed its 2-year Access to Mental Health Care in California campaign. Involved in that were articles, guest speakers, and publications designed to increase the awareness of loan forgiveness programs to work in underserved areas, and advocated for legislation aimed at increasing access to competent care. A byproduct of that campaign was, of course, the outreach plan for high schools and community colleges. At its March meeting, the Outreach and Education Committee discussed potential 2-year campaigns for the upcoming 2 years, so the 2018 and 2019 years. And it was determined that they would like to pursue a campaign focused on increasing diversity and cultural competency in the field of psychology. The campaign would simultaneously highlight important needs in the field, both increasing the number of providers that are culturally competent and increasing the diversity within the licensee population, while also focusing on issues of access to mental health care in underserved and vulnerable communities, and also would dovetail with the board's outreach plan to high schools and community colleges by reaching out to different associations that represent various ethnic and cultural subgroups. This campaign could also be inclusive of other groups that need increased representation, such as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning or LGBTQ communities as well. So we would like to, the committee would like to recommend the campaign of enhancing diversity and cultural competency as its new two-year campaign for the 2018 and 2019 calendar years. And board staff will work with the Outreach and Education Chair and Committee to identify potential presentations, guest speakers, potential partners in the campaign, and articles for the board's newsletters and other publications.
Any questions?
You were looking at Ms. Bernal. I think that all of the other comments
Oh,
tied
okay,
to that
yeah.
were
Thank
with
you.
item I, and it sounds like it makes sense to me, and,
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item K, and this is, Ms. Sorg will give us
I think we might need a motion to approve the two-year campaign from the committee recommendation. I is going to be more information that will be brought back with the kind of draft implementation timetable plan, and this would just be, let's do this and go ahead and proceed, or not.
Thank you. Microphone.
Microphone.
I move that we, for the outreach committee, I move that we approve the consideration of the two-year outreach and education campaign.
Second. Second.
All in favor? No.
Call for the
Oh,
question.
public comment, sorry, thank you.
Yes.
although I wonder if we would need to have public comment for J too, since they're tied together. I just wonder. I'm sorry, I. Sorry.
We're going to actually go back at the end, because there's been not much opportunity for public comment during this report, and do public comment on everything, but since there's a specific motion pending,
No, and I only say that because I think that I saw public having comments on that, and since these are tied together on some level, I would just wonder if that would be useful for us to consider that feedback during the motion, is all I was wondering. But I know that we wanted to go back at the end, but it made, when we said we were taking the motion now, I just would want to hear, because I saw people moving and indicating they had something to say about the other item. So for me to be able to vote, I think it would be helpful to hear that, the public feedback
Feedback on all
for I and J.
Okay, so should we, any public comment on item 17I? She just wants to hear it before she votes on the motion.
Yes, Dr.
Oh,
Joe
I-
Linder Crow with the California Psychological Association. I had a couple of questions, mostly for clarification about I. And am I right, you want to say public comment on earlier items until the end? So I'm just
Yeah,
commenting on I and J.
I and J.
Okay.
Yes.
So the notion of the Board of Psychology doing an outreach program to increase the number of licensees, can you just explain to me a little bit how you arrived at that as a priority for the Board of Psychology and how it fits into your strategic plan? For example, it's admirable, but I'm just wondering how it fits with, I think it may be sort of what you were asking Ms. Jones, and the comments on what would that look like? What would success look like? why do you want to increase the number of licensees if your concern is underrepresentation of psychologists in underserved areas, for example? Is increasing the number of licensees the right solution to that problem? And it's mostly just so that I understand how the board is coming to the conclusion of doing an outreach plan like that. And I guess I would say the same thing for Jay. Again, this is something that we all are concerned about. On Jay, I would offer, again, as we have in the past, that CPA might be a good partner on programs like that. We have a division of diversity and social justice, for example, and we also are concerned with increasing the numbers of not only service delivery to underserved areas, but increasing the number of ethnic minority individuals who are involved in psychology. And I raise that because previously, as some of you remember, we had offered to partner with the Board of Psychology on an ethics workshop. And several years ago, we did partner with the Board of Psychology on an ethics workshop specifically targeted toward diversity and cultural competence. So our offer to partner on an ethics workshop was turned down by the board. And I just hope that if you move forward with these kinds of programs, that there'll be a way for us to avoid a lot of, not just to avoid overlap. Overlap is fine sometimes. It's just I think we get more leverage when organizations can work together. So I'll stop there. I'm just kind of curious about it. It's different thing for the Board of Psychology over my experience, my 13 years at CPA, for the Board of Psychology to undertake this this kind of major project to increase the number of psychologists is something that the national organization and CPA and many, many, many other people have talked about and worked on for a long time. So I'm just kind of curious about how it fits and how we might, so that I can think about how we might assist the board in any way possible as you move forward.
Couple things just briefly. I think of the request was for us to do the expert training with CPA, and that was something we looked at the potential conflicts of interest and hosting that kind of a training at a CPA event. That was the issue. I think Dr. Phillips did an ethics panel with CPA fairly recently, so I just wanted to
Yeah, well, it really wasn't. The idea was not to do expert training. The idea was to kind of talk about the process as other states have done with state associations and board and regulatory boards, to really talk more about the process of applying the code of ethics and how a board might look at that. But I don't want to what's the right word? Relitigate that whole thing. I'm just more interested in these outreach programs and how, I think they're great. There might be people who would argue that there are plenty of psychologists. It's just that they're not in the right places. So I'm just trying to understand the motivation more than anything else.
I'm hoping I can just quickly say something, and then Dr. Horn and Ms. Akwebudu can jump in on kind of the policy side of things. Just from a numbers and data perspective, we did pull our aging licensee data fairly recently, a couple years ago, and we found that 39% of our licensed population is over the age of 60. So while today there may not be an access to individuals issue and more of a where are these people located issue, which was another article we did about the per county, per capita, and per patient ratio. I think just looking at the numbers, there was a question of how do we get people interested and kind of demystify the licensure process and the requirements process. So I think from a professional, just from my standpoint, the professional perspective is kind of one thing, getting people interested in the profession from one standpoint. I think from the board standpoint, it's what is the requirements, what are the steps that you would need to take to get licensure if you were interested in the profession. And then the cultural competence kind of on top of that. So briefly, that's kind of where I'm coming from, but the committee members can jump in and add to that.
That's, you hit the nail on the head, because we wanted to, and I think someone had mentioned earlier this evening, that we want to have people drawn to psychology, and also to not just stop at one level of psychology, but to ratchet it up to the PhD level and the licensure level. And as we pull back and look at our population in this country, it's highly diverse. And when we look at folks in not only the profession of psychology, but other professions as well, baby boomers are retiring. And as a result of that, we want people to take on these professions, which they're going to be highly diverse. And we want to also show them the relevancy, like you said, of psychology, to demystify as you move beyond the master's level. So we were thinking that if we cast this broad net, we are going to get a lot of folks, and they too will be the messengers for others. And so that's the rationale, and that's why we focused on licensure, because we wanted to move it forward as and in terms of income and making a living and all of that. When you ratchet it up to another level, it brings
When you say
forth
ratchet up, I'm sorry to interrupt, when you say
to
ratchet,
the licensure PhD level.
Oh.
That's where we would
well, just to be clear, there is no other than, I think, is it one state that licenses master's level psychologists? So there is no other, psychology is a doctoral level entry profession.
Well, we're talking
Overall.
about with mental
Let me
health.
just finish, yeah, thank you. So, and that's why we were saying we're looking at this broad.
So you're looking beyond
level.
psychology then? Is that what you mean?
No.
We're looking at psychology, but let me just ask this, can a master's level person do what a PhD level
No.
can do? Right, and so that's what we're doing, and along with those differences come another level of input, and that's what we were looking at. So, does that make sense? So that's what we were
think so.
looking at. Does that make sense? So we just
Well, I
want
think so.
them
I'm
at
not
the-
quibbling with I'm not quibbling with the goal of
Okay.
increasing more, or interest,
But you-
getting people
I got you.
interested in psychology. I was just kind of curious. That's
Why
helpful to
this-
know the rationale, that
Okay,
how
that's the
that would
rationale.
come from the Board of Psychology.
Yeah.
So,
So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's my, and we
Then-
wanted it at this level because when you look at it, and last thing I'm going to say, when we look at it, because when we look at decision-making, and this is in terms of psychology, one of the highest decision-making levels for psychology in the state. So if it comes from here, it gives it a whole different perspective also. I hope that helps. That's what we were.
Dr. Horn?
So just to tag on a little bit, another piece of this is that, as you know, one of the state concerns is about, do we have enough mental health professionals in
Right.
areas where people are
Right.
underserved, so you're exactly right. And one of the things we did was the committee looked at this research that had been done about where psychologists are, who they're working with, and all that, and, so even if they're located, say, in which they are in more populous areas, they're not necessarily located in areas that are typically underserved, or,
Right.
they're not working with population.
so is that one of the things then that you would be emphasizing when you go out and talk to these groups, that to let people know about the opportunities in those communities, or what it means to work in a community health clinic versus being in private practice and that sort of thing, and helping to communicate that value, I hope. Also, it would be great if the board, when you're doing this outreach, could also really let people know what these opportunities are for loan reimbursement and those kind of things that would put them in these underserved areas, which has been an ongoing challenge, is to really convince people that those opportunities are there and that they're worth taking advantage of. So that would be something that I hope you could include.
And then I think from our perspective too, and it's been touched on, I just want to say a little more, is that because in particular, doctoral level people are not there. Master's level people are,
Yes.
but doctoral level people aren't.
Right.
And so that's what we really want to take it from a licensure perspective, and kind of the responsibilities of doctoral level folks and stuff like that.
Right.
So it's just a little bit different emphasis. It's not, I think, exactly what y'all are doing, but I think it's, or what APA is doing, but it
Right.
definitely
Okay.
complements.
Right. And then I'll just add one more thing. When you begin to look at the cultural competence piece, I will again offer that we have an enormous amount of expertise here in California, as you know, as the psychologists on the board know in particular. And if we can be of any help in identifying the people who really are some of the leaders in this area, please, we'd be happy to help bring those people to the table.
Thank
Can I
you.
just say a little thing, and this isn't about outreach and education, but the CPA convention this year was all about diversity, and it was absolutely one of the best conventions I've been to that CPA has ever given, I must say, and I have said. But Miguel Gallardo gave a
Yes.
talk, which was really, really
Excellent.
a good one.
And he's one of those
Remember, he
people.
was
He's one of those experts, for sure.
previous member.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And can I just add on, thank you, Dr. Linda Crow, for your comments. You're one of the people I could tell wanted to speak earlier before the break. I will just say that I think that what was said is a very important comment, is the collaboration piece with, I know we talked about it earlier in your report, Ms. Bernal, about the different ethnic-specific groups too, because in terms of the resources, but also with the loan repayment piece, I know we mentioned it earlier, the HPEF, the Health Professionals Education Fund. So I think there is opportunities as staff continue to build out the plan, the collaboration piece, which I think that what I heard from Ms. Sorek and from the committee was something that we really wanted to do. So, very exciting.
Thank you.
And I would just add, in addition to looking at underserved areas, we need to look at a variety of different underserved populations, which are defined by a variety of different aspects of diversity. So I'd hope that we're very broad in the way that we think about that, so that we can be, and that's the tone of what it
Right.
sounded like when you were talking about item J.
Thank you. Yes, it is. So now, do we go back into the motion, or?
Yeah, you do.
Okay.
Any board discussion?
So now you
We have
call
board
for the question.
Public comment. The board,
Is there any board discussion?
no?
Ready to vote?
We'll call the roll.
Go ahead.
Nicoy Badoo,
Yes, aye.
Bernal,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Horn,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
And that motion passes.
Thank you. Now, we've got 2 agenda items left. Ms. Sorek, if you could please give us an update on the use of social media platforms for communicating to stakeholders, agenda item.
Sure. Currently, the board utilizes Facebook and Twitter for communication to stakeholders. I have a list of different items, things like job announcements, legislative advisories, regulatory changes, newsletters, that we will post a link to on both of those sites. The Outreach and Education Committee did discuss our current platforms, And as the needs of the board may change, there may be other opportunities to use other social media platforms. So this is just going to be kind of a thing that the Outreach and Education Committee will work with staff to continue to monitor and keep an eye on.
Thank you. Any questions? Public comment? Thank you. And our last item, our TCA brochure, Professional Therapy Never Includes Sex update. Ms. Sorick?
So this actually has come up both at the licensing committee and at the outreach and education committee. The retitling of the brochure, as well as looking at the content, because the content hadn't been looked at for some time. We reached out at the outreach and education committee to Board of Behavioral Sciences, as well as the medical board, who are co-authors in this publication. And the enforcement staff of all three boards will be getting together in September to look at the content. There are already some edits that our staff has come up with to address some of the issues that have come up and some of the complaints and cases that we have seen recently. Once some recommendations are put together by staff, we're going to convene a group of subject matter experts from all three of the boards, and the content will be updated and changed and presented to the board for final approval. So we will be updating you as the process evolves.
Thank you. That's it for our community outreach and education.
Thank you very much for that action-packed report. Where are we going to next? Oh, would somebody like to make a motion to approve the committee report? Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. We said we were going to give you an opportunity for public comment.
I apologize.
Come on down.
I just had a couple of questions about earlier items. With regard to the August 22nd stakeholders meeting for Pathways to Licensure, I'm just curious, you mentioned the groups that you were reaching out to. I do know that a couple of our chapter presidents told me that they got invitations, and I'm just wondering if you sent, if you're sending invitations to all of the Southern California chapters of CPA. Is there any way we can help in getting the information out about this? I wasn't clear on whether, at first I wasn't clear on whether it was kind of by invitation only. I don't think that's true, but you were trying to target. So could you just, how did you decide, you know, who to invite? We're happy to see if we can help get the word out for that meeting.
If it's okay with you, it might just be the most prudent moving forward if you can share with us your contact list on who we should send it to, and we'll double check it with our list and just make sure we're not missing anybody.
Okay, well, all of our chapter presidents are on our website and with email addresses, and I don't know how you communicated with them, but they're all, if that's what you mean. I would suggest the Southern California chapters might be a good contact. They're not that many. But San Diego,
we
LA.
can send it to all of your chapter folks that you have on the website. That's fine. If you want us to just go ahead and do that, we will do that. But
Yeah,
it is a publicly noticed meeting, so
Okay.
it's also on our social media. It's sent
Okay.
to our interested parties, our stakeholders.
Okay.
So it's not just by invitation only. We did target certain individuals to send a letter to make sure that they were aware of it.
Okay.
But we also, on top of that, did our public notice like we always do for our meetings.
Okay. And then I had one other question. Did I understand it correctly that at the meeting, or that in your group of stakeholders, that there may have been invitations to groups, to individuals or organizations that are not related to psychology?
We sent the invitation out to consumer organizations, so I'm trying to think of example. We sent it out to Weave, we sent it out to some other organizations. NAMI, we sent it
okay.
to.
What about other professional organizations? Did you, other professions?
We did send it out to the Medical Association, because we were going to be talking about the change in direct supervision, who can provide supervision.
Oh, okay.
So anyone that may or may not be impacted, we wanted to make it an open and transparent
Okay.
process and try and not leave anybody out of
Okay.
the process.
Okay, thank you. And then I just wanted to mention one thing, just for the board's information. You had talked quite a bit about how you were trying to drive people to your website and through social media and so forth. And I wanted to just remind the board that our Director of Professional Affairs, Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman, we have a part on our website that's available to CPA members called Professional Tools and Resources. And one of the things that we have heard from our members is that and this is not, it's not specific to the Board of Psychology website. All websites can be hard to navigate if you don't know what you're doing. But we have heard that it's hard to find things on the website. So what we have on our website in that section is that we have it broken down and curated into about 35 different topic areas. And then when individuals go there, for example, one of the topic areas might be licensure, and then under that, how to get licensed online, or how to apply online, or how to renew your license online. Then if the person clicks there, then we have a direct link, not to the Board of Psychology website, but to the page on the Board of Psychology website that specifically answers that question. So we are doing that from the perspective of trying to give our members the information that they need in a very easy and easily digestible way. But I wanted to let you know that if you look at that part of our website, you will see that there are a lot of links that go straight to the Board of Psychology website. So hopefully that will be helpful in allowing people to access directly just what they need, instead of having to go through, like, all the continuing education or new laws and regulations. So I just wanted to let the board know that, not because most of you, I'm sure the psychologist members of the board look at our website all the time, but maybe for some of you, you don't do that. So I just wanted to let you know that that is there, and we try to keep that updated as much as we can.
Thank you.
Dr. Melody Schaefer, Division II in CAPIC. I heard earlier for the Northern Cal meeting that you had that you had a sense that maybe not many training directors came. So I'm wondering if for the Southern California meeting, if the board had a flyer of some sort that described fully what was going on. I'd be happy as Vice Chair of CAPIC to send it out to our constituency in Southern Cal so we can get training directors to come, and also to our Division II members who are primarily training directors as well.
And I've spoken several times to Division II leadership about how much we would like them to promote. So that would probably be a great idea.
Well, as the rep for Division II, we'll take that, and if you send it to me, we'll
Send it
put
through
it
to
on out.
CAPIC too.
Yeah, into CAPIC, we have,
I think, wasn't Renee there? Yeah. He was, KPIC was there.
yeah, I
yeah,
know. I
yeah.
asked them to show up because since I wasn't going to both, I was going to the Southern Cal one. But again, a flyer, as opposed to in my words, I'd rather have something from the board to send as an invitation if that's something you're interested in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So can I move into motion that the board accept the community outreach and stakeholders report? Did I say it right?
Just the Outreach and Education
Outreach and
Committee
Education
report.
Committee report.
Second.
It's like a gunfight at the OK Corral.
All in favor? Yes.
Made the motion to approve the Outreach and Education Committee report?
Not Bernal.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then
Seconded by
Who seconded?
Dr. Horn.
Dr. Horn seconded. Ms. Jones.
Somebody, just put somebody there.
Somebody.
We all second it.
way, Ty.
It was really confusing.
Okay, we're voting.
McCoy Badoo?
Aye.
Bernal?
I
Erickson?
Aye.
Fu?
Aye.
Horn?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
Phillips?
Aye.
And that report is accepted.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Before we start this first part of 13A, continuing professional development regulations, I just want to thank not only the licensing committee, but all the staff who had been there before. I mean, the licensing staff, all the staff who was there previously. I'd like to thank the board members who've been there working on this, because this has been a several-year process, and we've had people come and go over this issue, I think. Is that how many? 7? It's been 7 years? So, but I think we are just about there to get official here. So, seriously, I do want to thank everyone. This has been a lot of hard work. We've come back over and over and over these things, and I also want to thank people who've sat through our meetings, through every word that we've looked at and gone back over and re-gone over and everything, but I think we're in a good place right now. So what we want to do here is review this draft regulatory language. This is what we're asking the board to do. Review this draft regulatory language and move to accept the language as written, delegating authority to the executive officer to review and revise the use of the word may throughout the document, and replace with can or shall as appropriate, but also grant her the authority to proceed with the rulemaking file and other things like this. I don't want to just say that, because we're going to actually go through this, but grant her the ability to revise, to review and revise and make this appropriately worded for a rulemaking file and to move forward with that. So, thank you. And who's moving this and going through this on there? Are you good? Huh? Okay. All right, you're moving this. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, so the first part of this, because this has taken a while, we've changed the dates, and now these are the current regulations, and they would remain in effect until December 31st, 2020. All right, so what I'd like to do is move from what's currently there, just understanding that we've moved up the date, and if we could just start with 1397.60 definitions effective January 1st, 2021. And we'll just move through. Let me ask, first of all, by the board, any comments you have about what's worded here, what's stated here. We'll just move on through, looking at the new parts. actually do. So, I don't know. Are y'all surprised?
No.
You're not? That's still the old part. We're gonna scroll down. So if we go to page 7, it's 1397.61, page 7. These are my suggestions, so, I mean, we'll give everybody a chance. So here we are. Under A, except as provided in section 2915E. So it's right at the top of the page. Okay, and it's the second to the last line, and the last line there, and that part is pretty short. But we're talking about subject the licensee, but we talk about render their license. So I would change that to his or her. I'm on page 7 of CPD regulations, right at the top of the page. I'm sorry? Okay.
So you're on 61 and not 60? 1397, 61.
Right, I just said, we're just going to start at the beginning and go through. So here's the first thing I had. Page 7, 1361, top of the page, Part A. First, the next to the last line in that paragraph, change there to his or her. Just a grammatical thing. Moving down that page, on Part B, the third line from the last line of that thing, documentation, which of the CPD activities, because we're talking again about the licensee, so instead of saying their CPD activities, let's just say the CPD activities. That's my suggestion. And then in Part C, third from the last line, again, which of the CPD activities are being used? So here's something, and this may be just a little, it may be just the way I'm reading it. Under the next page, page 8, practice outcome monitoring. Part B, one patient client of POM equals 1 hour credited. It just reads a little odd. It's not a patient client of practice outcome monitoring. So I'm wondering if we could say POM for one patient client equals 1 hour credited.
Can you repeat that? One?
POM
Yeah.
for one patient client equals 1 hour credited. I'm sorry.
Case of yesterday comes to
Under professional service, the next one, number 3, in Part C, the licensee shall maintain a record of this activity. It's under professional service, it's number 3, and it's Part C. The licensee shall maintain. No, Part C says the licensee shall maintain a record this activity, and I just said to add of. You think I'm anal retentive? Do you think I'm anal retentive? Okay. Page 9. Number 7, attendance at a California Board of Psychology meeting. In Part A, we have said a maximum of 8 hours can be credited, and yet 1 full day is 6 hours. And so I'm wondering if we could make it essentially 9 hours, not essentially, if we can make it 9 hours, because that would give a day is 6 hours. If somebody goes to a committee meeting or something, that's a half a day. That's 3 hours. So I'm wondering if we could make it 1 additional hour.
I think Dr. Horn, initially, that calculation was based on the fact that most committees are 2 hours, except our committee. I mean, you know, because we had full days, but I think, you know, and we had a longer meeting for policy and advocacy, but I feel like that was unusual. Usually it's been 2, but I do see your point, though.
Yeah,
Your meetings are 8 hours?
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
for days.
Super Bowl.
Don't you want to be in that committee? But I actually think what it says is for committee meetings of 3 hours or less, you get 1 hour.
Right.
So somebody could attend 2 committee meetings and a board meeting and get 8, or they could attend 3 committee meetings and get 9.
That's not what it is. It says 1 hour of attendance equals 1 hour of credit.
Oh, okay, never mind.
4 committee meetings that are 3 hours or
Yeah,
less.
yeah. Okay,
It's 1 for 1.
I withdraw my comment.
Okay, that's fine. I just, all right, that was the way I'm reading. I'm fine with whatever you say.
Before we leave this one,
Yeah.
on A under 7, let's just move the period inside the quote. At a board of psychology meeting.
Actually, that has changed, that rule.
Not in my book.
It actually has,
It has.
yeah.
Is it AP or APA?
Or Chicago Annual.
It's APA. I've had stuff corrected in that way, so, me. You.
It's not gonna go to publication, so.
Okay. And I have,
It's a nonsensical technical.
you're gonna change it? Whatever you want. That to me, I don't. And I just have one more, and it's just a question. It's at the top of that page, under C. The licensee shall maintain a record of this activity. This record shall include name of exam, dates of service, and number of hours. Do we mean of service? I think that might make it clearer. At the top of the page, of page 9, at the very top, under C, there you go. It ends and number of hours, and I'm wondering if we ought to say, because,
I think that's how they all are.
They all do.
The same is for expert review below. Dates of service and number of hours.
yeah, okay. All right, for some reason, it just stood out to me there, but that's fine. That's it. Those are all my suggestions for CPD. They're not really substantive, but grammatical stuff. So does anybody else on the board have anything they want to say about CPD, this document?
I have nothing to add for corrections. I just wanted to acknowledge the hard work that got us to this place.
Yeah.
So, great work as the committee chair, Dr. Hearn.
Thank you.
And committee members,
And
Dr.
the committee
Phillips.
members.
And
And Ms. Jones. So, should we take public comment now before any kind of motion to do this? How should we do this?
There's just one thing that I wanted to point out, touching upon what you said, Dr. Horn, with respect to a potential motion delegating some authority to executive officer, is I believe, Ms. Burns may be able to help me out here, may be able to correct me, that the board staff wanting to be proactive in wanting to make sure there were no areas of lack of clarity for OAL. There were a couple instances where there was a use of the word may, and they were concerned that OAL may say, well, if you say may, you need to indicate where it may not. And there were, I think, just two examples where I said, okay, what I think you're saying is, and at least what's relevant here is, there were a couple instances where the board said may, and I said, I see that as granting permission. I didn't see it as terribly unclear, except to the degree that OAL may say, is that the exhaustive list? Is it a may only? And so I think we changed two instances of may to may only, and I wanted to make sure with the board that accurately reflected the policy of the board. And the first one is on page 2, under definitions 1397.60, A, for professional activities under peer consultation, and it's the 5th line down toward the end. I believe that is it's one of the times that we change may to may only.
It says may. Are you talking about number 1, peer consultation?
Oh, mine actually says may only.
There was an updated hand carry.
Oh, I didn't see that.
So I believe that was one change, and I think there's
Okay.
one other. Ms. Burns, do you remember? I don't know if we need to do a search for the word may only.
I'm gonna look for only, because it's
Thank you.
unfortunately, we lost the highlight.
Here, she's here. Okay, so it may have been those, and I don't know what you have in front of you, but there were a couple instances where we said, okay, if we want to make sure that OAL does not question, is this list exhaustive, is it may, are there other things, is it like an includes but not limited to, although the board didn't phrase it in that way, we wanted to check to see if there were places where we should say may only to reflect that is kind of the exhaustive list. I don't remember there being that many, so there may have already been a couple cases.
May only, yeah. See, these two I think were already there.
Right, I think there were two that I went over with Mr. Glass-Steagall.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember which was the other one, because it was only the second one.
So right now, you're saying the only one you know for sure is the peer
I
consultation?
think it was that one
Yeah.
that you've got highlighted there.
Under publications?
I believe so. Does that sound familiar?
I think so, because I think it had May counted one.
And
You're
what
right.
page is that
So
on?
Page 10.
Thank you.
And that way we were clarifying it can only be counted, or it can only be counted one.
Right, which I didn't think was really
Yeah, that was page 2.
in dispute,
going
but
to page
I think staff just wanted to be proactive in making sure that any of those areas that
Yeah.
OAL might say,
No, it said may only on the
okay, so then there was
original.
one other. And I bet Mr. Glass-Steagall would remember.
Mr. Glass-Steagall, if you're listening, do you remember?
But that first one under pure consultation, so you reflect that, yours reflects that it says may. So
Right.
that was one area, and
Yeah.
as I said, I think there was one other instance
I mean, we can look at all the places if you want where it says
Right.
May only on the new one, and then I can compare it.
Jason was confirming that it was only the page 2 that had the May only added.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. only
Great.
the one, and at the other places, it was clear enough already.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Glass-Steagall. And thanks, Ms. Marks, that's a good update.
Been changed, but on page 3, there's a cross-out under B2, under academic sponsored CE. There's a cross-out in the packet, but the hand carry may be different.
Thank you.
Just to make sure it's covered.
Hand carry does have the cross out as well.
Yeah.
That means,
I think we want to take that cross-out out, don't we?
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
something that wasn't taught.
We didn't catch
And there's another one, too. There's another one in this as well.
Okay,
I don't remember where it is, but
so let's delete the cross-out under 2, and then make sure the next one is the same.
page 15. $1397.62. Yeah.
I think this was also to show the board what had been changed.
And then also page 16 and 17. I think you just missed one, didn't you?
I just, that's the,
Yeah.
no, that's existing language. That has to stay, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Let me just double check that I didn't do that again. That's all I'm.
And then 1397.67. Page 17.
And just so we didn't lose that part,
That was all underlined.
but that was the part about after it's been expired for 3 years, does that cover somewhere else, or are we, what was the issue with that?
I believe we found it somewhere else. Because it was in.
I think we did change the wording about, something about passing the licensing exam, as I recall.
You're gonna be on licensing too.
I want to say that it needed to be.
Everything makes, it floats, like we don't get.
Oh, now it does. I wasn't sure. Wait till you see our pathways to license.
Or what, oh, really? Is it like this too?
Well, except we're doing statute and regulation and making sure everything matches. And
is it uniform? Right now it's uniform.
No, right now it's me and Stephen. Nicole wasn't here, but she hasn't been this year.
Oh, and then it's,
Yeah.
so do they come up too? What, do they come up too, or you come down?
They're in Sacramento.
We're just trying to make sure that if we delete that provision, that we're not inadvertently getting rid of a major, authority.
We can leave that, I mean, that's gonna be just whether or not we determine we make sure it's somewhere else,
This,
I don't, we're not deleting it as a policy issue, but I think we're just deleting it here because it is somewhere else, and we just didn't.
it's not CPD,
Right.
and the rest of this is about CPD.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think we had that discussion about moving it somewhere
Right.
else, but I just didn't wanna move that
Right.
totally.
Are we okay to move on, and we won't lose it, but we'll take it out of here?
Yeah.
Okay,
Right, we'll just make sure, before we take it out of there, we'll just make sure we know where it is.
okay. So, Ms. Jones?
Can I make a motion to accept the language?
Absolutely.
As written and delegating the authority to the executive officer to review and revise the document and grant her the authority to proceed with the rulemaking file.
Non-substantive.
To
Right.
review and revise non-substantive changes and grant her the authority to proceed with the rulemaking file.
Second.
Would that be right?
Yeah, so you wanna approve this language for notice, the language as amended for noticing? You wanna set it for hearing?
Okay, that wasn't the, I do. That wasn't the motion that was here, but yeah, I will do that. I'll change my motion.
Oh, and I will second your change.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to accept this, proceed with the rulemaking file with granting to the executive officer the ability to make non-substantive changes, and then we would want it set for hearing. Any more board discussion about that? All right, then let me ask, is there any public comment about this?
Joe Linder Crow from the California Psychological Association. Just because we have all spent so much time on this, and we want to be sure that it's right, I have just a few questions. And actually, if we could go back to page 2, which is 139760, where the definitions are.
I'm sorry, what page?
Page 2. And, this is partly to clarify, I know that we're going to all have to do a lot of work in educating everyone about what everything means, and we can't answer, I would say to anyone watching, we can't answer every question about every possible scenario at this time. But I do want to try and clarify a few things. Under 139760, under the definition of peer consultation means structured and organized interaction in person or electronically mediated. Does the term electronically mediated include the telephone? Yes? Okay. At one point in time, there was actually some conversation about what happens if I'm sitting on an airplane. And
No.
I just want to clarify that what we are talking about is structured and organized interaction rather than coincidental interaction with the cardiologist that you might sit by on the plane. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Then under number 7 on page 3, there is no provision here, as it's stated, for attending half day of a board meeting. So you have to attend a full day board meeting. Is that correct? Okay. Okay, on page.
Actually, a full day or a
Or
committee
the
meeting.
committee
That's
meetings,
3
right,
hours,
right.
yeah.
But if you're at a board meeting, you have to be there the full day. Okay. Still on page 3, 139760 B2. Yes, 139760 B2, academic sponsor approved continuing education instruction. I'm reading a couple of comments from Ms. Van Workum in my office. So, sponsor approved CE instruction means teaching a sponsored CE course that relates to the practice of psychology. I think I'm a little confused about why it says sponsor approved CE instruction there. Do you mean? For example, if a psychologist teaches a course that is approved by CAMFT and can make the connection that it's related to psychology, would they be able to use that? Or what do we mean by sponsor approved there? Might be good to, is that the same definition that is defined earlier? Or is it earlier? Somewhere.
Taking a sponsored approved course. That's a good question. I think we need to close that quote. That's what Ms. Bernal said.
B.
On B.
Right, but
Oh,
beyond the open quote, what does sponsor approved CE instruction mean in that context?
You know, that's a good question. I think we were thinking, and I'd like to check with the committee, but I think we were thinking those sponsor-approved courses that the board approves. So it's this, in that regard, it's the same definition. One place we have taking the sponsor-approved course, and the other is teaching the sponsor-approved course. And that's board-approved, those entities that the board has approved.
Dr. Horn?
Okay,
On page 4, because, sorry, Dr. Linda Crowe.
no, that's fine.
Because I think that we did look, I was thinking we had defined that before, but on page 4, item C, so it would be.
Yes.
There is some language there that maybe needs to be lifted over to be put there. to
Well, or just
describe-
referenced then, maybe
Yeah.
as defined in whatever, because there, then you're referencing sponsor CE as, and whose courses are accepted for credit pursuant to section 1397.61K. So maybe just a reference
That's
to C, would that
Yeah,
help
that's a
clarify
good
that? Okay.
amendment. Thank you.
Okay, now moving to,
Dr.
uh-huh,
just so Sharice can, Ms. Burns can catch that.
under B, with B, right? With B. B, 2B. B2, B2B. B2B, but maybe a reference there to,
Or not.
and you can, or as Descartes said, on his deathbed, I think not, right? So, anyway, okay, so it would be to say, sponsor-approved CE instruction means teaching a sponsored CE course that relates to the practice of psychology, and then reference or you could say sponsor-approved CE instruction as defined in, and then whatever those, yes, I'm getting lost in the letters. Yeah. So you would refer to that reference on page 4, which is C under, well, you guys can figure that out.
We'll figure it out.
Right, you got it? Is that clear? Yeah, good. Okay. And then, moving to page 7, 1397-61, B and C. I want to clarify for the record and for all of us that when you use the term 4 hours of training, that the way that a psychologist would discuss meeting this requirement will continue to be by attestation, and not, that this does not refer to a 4-hour course. Okay.
And we actually talk about it later when we talk about what would suffice, right?
Okay. Then on page 9, 1397.61 G 4. I'm sorry, page 10. Just a question here. So, would it be true that and this may go back to the definition of a publication, I suppose. The question is, would it be true that publishing an article you would be allowed to claim the same amount of credits as you would if you wrote a book? And the question has sort of come up, is that equitable? And honestly, I'm looking for the definition of publications, which must be here. Oh, yes. Publications means authoring or co-authoring peer-reviewed journal articles, book chapters, books, or editing or co-editing a book related to psychology or related discipline. And what I'm reading, how I'm reading that then, is that any of those things you would be able to use as credits under publications, and they're all equated the same, right? Okay. There is a question that we have about 1397.61H.
On page 10?
Wait, 1397.61 H.
Sponsored continuing education? Oh,
Yes.
Okay,
H2.
page 11.
Wait, this is not right. It's the definition, I must not be looking at this right. 1397.61 H2, which is here referenced as OB 4. That's not, it's where's the definition? Why, I must have written this down wrong. The question is that it's the very definition of sponsored CE.
Isn't here
1397 point,
sponsored?
Wait a minute.
That's what she's asking, that's H.
that's what she's talking about, but she says that's not what she's talking about, so
Sorry.
we gotta find out where.
Oh, I think it's actually on page 12, under, no, I see what happened. So it's on page 12, the number 2, the approving organization shall ensure that approved providers, and then it goes on to describe the criteria that should be used to the criteria that must be met for it to pass the content test. I think there is maybe some language that we talked about at one time that's not here, and that would be language that would be sure to include some of those business of practice issues that we've talked about so lovingly over the years. I believe that our language in our sponsor approval system may have a little bit of additional language, and I'm just asking, I don't recall if that got intentionally omitted, or was it just left out inadvertently?
You know, I just thought if there was more stringent requirements from your agency.
Yeah, it's not more stringent, it would be more inclusive of content than this would indicate.
I don't think there would be anything in this language that would prohibit you from requiring additional information. I'm looking at Ms. Marks, because it seems like number 2 would be
That's
the
not-
minimum that we would ask of the approving organizations, and then beyond that, you could ask for whatever you require.
Yeah, it's
saying
not that
something else.
exactly. It's that, if this is, the question would be, is this all that's allowed? Or, would this allow for a broader content than, these 4 things here, which comes from not only our criteria, but APA's criteria as well. But it just seems like, and I asked Ms. Van Workum, and I apologize, let me see if she might have said anything. I believe that there's just some other language that we had considered at one point.
So you're talking about maybe having, allowing courses that might teach about the things like managing the business of psychology or something like this. I mean, I can, which I'm not sure would be appropriate. Like,
Right.
but I do think record keeping, but all of that, to me, fits into this direct consumer application
Right.
that informs current practice.
Right.
say.
So here's the language that we have. We have this same language, related to ethical, legal, statutory, or regulatory guidelines, standards that impact psychology. But we have, well, no, I think that's it. The 4, programs whose content focuses on non-traditional or emerging practice or theory and can demonstrate relevance to practice. So we're thinking of things like, I think HIPAA and things like that would fit under the regulatory guidelines and standards, don't
Right.
you?
Mhm.
And then, and I don't see that we have anything different in our language other than, let's see, we have,
Can I make a suggestion, Madam Chair?
yeah,
I wanted to make sure we had a break, because it's been about an hour and a half. So why don't we, should we take like a 10-minute break? And that
Think
will allow
that's
you
great.
time to identify?
yeah, and let me just make a call to my office. I think that these are probably okay, but, it could be that I'm missing something here. And
Maybe
then.
you can find out during the break.
Yeah, and then let me just see if there's any, I think there was just one other tiny thing before we,
We need the break.
okay, let me just, okay.
You'll still have the floor.
No, I know, I'm just trying to, I think that was pretty much it, in terms of just kind of those questions.
Okay, so if you clarify that.
Yep.
During our break time,
I
we'll
will.
come back to you.
I
Thank
will.
you.
I've got 25 after, we'll reconvene at 35 after?
All right, Dr. Linda Crow, you. I'll be quick. Well,
I'll
you
be
don't have,
quick.
now you can.
I'll be quick. Never mind what I said about that, we're good. And one final we're fine. And one final question, under the exemption part, is it correct that there is no other kind of exemption other than a military exemption? Not for health, not for a family member being ill, no other exemption for the requirements other than a military exemption?
That we're putting in here, I think. I mean, people, yeah. That is put in here.
No other stated exemption?
Correct.
I just want to make one
If I'm
final comment.
remembering
I want to applaud the board for working on these regs. I want to thank the board for taking the hiatus and allowing ample comment from psychologists. I know that for those people that might be watching, that once the board approves this, this will go out for comment. I do want to say again, in terms of collaboration, I want to offer that at any time we can, that we work together on being able to get information out and making sure that psychologists understand all the intricacies of these regs. I also want to emphasize, again, to anyone watching, that these regs will not become effective until 2021. I answer a lot of questions about whether or not there are new regs or so forth, and I would hope that along the way we could do some joint webinars. We're going to need to do a lot of things to really make sure that everyone is on board with this. I also wanted to confirm, and for the, for anyone who's watching, that there will be this 1 year that is described in the regulations where there's going to be a crossover year, whenever that year is, so that there could be a time when a licensee might have already earned all of their CE credits in 1 year, it would be in 2020. A person could have earned all of their credits in 2020 under the OIL system, and that will be allowable, and that we will make clear to everybody how that would work so that you could demonstrate that you had opted to get all of your credits under the old system in that transition year. So we'll be doing a lot of education and conversation. So again, thank you to the board for allowing sufficient time for these regs to be, I think, greatly improved and much more clear. And we appreciate that very much, and we'll help in any way we can to
Thank
make
you,
sure
Dr. Lynn.
licensees know what these
Yes.
are.
Yes, thank you so much, and we appreciate your help in getting this out to licensees. And again, I want to say that I'm glad we took the time to get here and really because even though we had thought that we had been open and transparent, which we had, but people, I think, hadn't tuned in. I think there was a way that people didn't know the significance of the change or whatever. So once we got that feedback, which we definitely got that feedback, I'm just really happy that we did this. And again, I want to say for everybody who worked on it, and I also want to include it starting with Ms. Arias Bhatia, Dr. Gallardo, Dr. Cadow, Dr. Harlem, and certainly Ms. Jones, who's now just off the licensing committee, and all the staff, because again, I'm going to say we've been through several staff members started with this and who are no longer with us. It's like, we're leaving the board. Just want to say again, it's been a really great process and a collaborative one in every way, and that has had a really good feeling. So, thanks.
I just want to say on behalf of staff that we really appreciate the licensing committee taking this on and helping us with the verification and documentation piece of the regulations. I think that was one thing we saw. The last package is very aspirational and it had great goals, but it was and how are we going to do this part that staff had concerns, and you were very receptive and open to that, and we really appreciate that.
And I think apropos the comments that Dr. Linda Crow made, I think it has been a very helpful process for us to have slowed this down. I know some of us were disappointed when we had to do it, but the reality is I think we have a much tighter group of regulations that are at least more understandable, if not completely understandable to the person reading them. And we really appreciate the feedback we've gotten from licensees that allowed us to pick up some of these errors and oversights on our part, and the feedback from the California Psychological Association. And I would like to really shout out to Dr. Horn, because nobody has spent more time or worked harder on this.
Thank you. Thank you. I love my committee.
Even spending a whole Sunday together.
A Super Bowl
Super Bowl Sunday.
Super Bowl Sunday, that's right.
So I also want to just say thank you to Dr. Horn and her leadership, and in terms of how we just saw this presented, that's how we did every meeting, looking at line by line and going over and over. So I just want to thank you for your leadership. It has been a pleasure to serve with you and Dr. Phillips and all the other folks you mentioned. I do want to just pick up on one comment that Dr. Linda Crow made that I think is important as we look to adopting this motion, is that the issue of, you said, we don't know what scenarios are. And I know we talked about this throughout the process, that as we go moving forward, if the rulemaking passes, that we talk about this in terms of scenarios. Because I think that was kind of the challenge.
As part of our education, you mean?
And part of the whole how we present it. And
Right.
so I think that as we go forward with all of the required meetings, we consider some kind of way to include that scenario piece in there so people would have some suggestions and hope to minimize confusion.
That's a great point.
But Dr. Horn, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your good,
Thank
hard
you,
work.
Ms. Jones. Appreciate that. So now
I think
Ms. Sark.
Ms. Jones may need to amend her motion if she accepts the one change that Dr. Linda Crow suggested, adding the reference section in the language that was changed during public comment.
Okay.
Yes, and of course, part of that motion was to give you discretion on non-substantive changes. So that is one of those, but I will accept that amendment to my motion.
And second.
So now it's time, I think, for us to take a vote. No further discussion. So, Ms. Burns, will you?
There's still time for this to go sideways.
Okay, really fast then. Ready, go. According to
Aye.
Bernal,
I'm
Erickson,
Aye.
Fu,
Aye.
Horn,
Aye.
Jones,
Absolutely.
Phillips.
Thank God, aye.
That is approved.
All right. Whoa.
And I had hair.
Okay, so now we are at 13B. And these are some different. Now we are at 13B, and these are some different requests for approvals. So I'd like to bring to the board these requests and the licensing committee's recommendations for these people. So the first is psych assistant number 1. And we needed some more information. We felt we needed some more information from this particular psych assistant number 1. We asked for that information and asked if possible for this person to get it in so we would be able to review it for this board meeting, in time for this board meeting, but that information didn't come in time for us to review it for the board meeting, so this will have to be put over once we get the information for the next licensing committee meeting and then to bring it to the board. So we're just letting y'all know on that. We haven't gotten the information yet. Next is 13B, and this is psych assistant number 2. And this psych assistant requested an extension to the 72-month registration period for registration as a psych assistant, asked for an extension of that. And this had to do with needing to change the chair of number 2's dissertation committee. And that required this person to be registered as a psych assistant longer than would have been because the doctorate hadn't been complete yet. And so because of these factors, which were really beyond number 2's control, the licensing committee is recommending that we approve this person's extension. That's number 2. And then number 3, this is agenda item. Well, should I go on to this one? Because this is a different one. This is C, so it's not part of B. Should I ask the committee should I ask the board to approve the first thing, or should I get everybody done and then ask the board to approve it? It's a different number agenda.
I think I would just do them letter by letter, so
Okay, so 13B,
2 months and then
this is essentially psych assistant number 2. I want to move that the board accept the committee's recommendation to approve number 2's extension of number 2's timeframe to get the hours of supervised professional
Second.
experience. Thank you. So is there any board comment on this? Number 2? Do I need to ask for public comment around this? Okay. Is there any comment from the public? Is there public? We have one public.
Somebody else is coming.
Okay, then I think we're ready for the vote. Ms. Burns?
You want to do mine too?
Coividu,
Aye.
Bernal,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Fu,
Aye.
Horn,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
That passes.
Okay, we're moving on to 13C, and this is psych assistant number 3. This person is asking for an extension to the 30 consecutive months to accrue supervised professional experience. These are, I think, the 3 pre-doc hours. I think it says post-doc, but this is so the person can take the EPPP. Am I correct? So, this person actually started getting SPE in the late 1990s, experienced there was a significant family tragedy that left number 3 basically responsible for caring for young children and other family members alone. So number 3 had to put SPE on hold and go to work in a different capacity and earn enough money to support the family, but then came back to it, and if allowed to count the first hours, the 612 hours that number 3 earned, say 10 years ago, then number 3 can sit for the EPPP and move on with the rest of the requirements for licensure. The licensing committee voted to approve that request, and that's what I'd like to ask the board. I'd like to move that the board approve that request of number 3 as well. So it's been moved and seconded, and is there any more discussion? Okay. Then, is there any public comment about this? Okay, then Ms. Jones, would you call the roll?
She didn't mean Miss Jones, she meant Miss Burns.
You can call her on.
She looked at me.
I'm sorry, Ms. Burns?
Coividu.
Aye.
Bernal.
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Fu,
Aye.
Horn,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Motion passes.
So that actually concludes the licensing committee report. Again, I want to thank Ms. Chung, too. I want to specifically just for kind of getting this stuff together, organizing us, making sure we're kind of following where these things are in the process and everything. I really appreciate that. Thanks so much. And since we've essentially voted on every part of our committee, we don't need to vote on any more of it, so that concludes our report. So, thanks.
So what's next? Enforcement committee report? Okay. So we're going to move to agenda item number 18. I think this time I should look at Ms. Bernal since the chair's sitting across the room for her. But Ms. Coividu, number 18, the enforcement committee report?
wasn't even on. Okay, and we're looking forward to, the enforcement committee, well, not the enforcement committee, but there will be an enforcement meeting in July. Myself, Ms. Monterrubio, and, Evan. Did I say that right?
Yes, Evan.
Yes. So, I just needed to say that, and then I'm going to turn it over to, Sandra.
So in the Enforcement Committee report is item number 18, and the Enforcement Committee and board staff met in May to discuss and review proposed changes to the disciplinary guidelines. The committee will reconvene in October to go over those changes and complete its review of the guidelines. And at our November meeting, the committee will be prepared to present the final draft to the full board for approval.
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does that conclude the enforcement
That
committee report?
concludes
That concludes
the enforcement committee report, and it's informational only, and I don't think we need to make a, oh, yes, you do have to, you all have to accept it.
I actually have a question.
Oh,
Or,
yes.
and I think it's appropriate at this point, because I know at our last board meeting, we adopted that rule, or I don't know if we adopted it, but we had the rule for enforcement cases, if one person holds it, then, I just wanted to get it from you, because that was the conversation we had at the time, checking in with staff, is that working okay? Is it become too time intensive, or?
It's
just wanted to-
it's actually working just fine. I think the board had one case to hear this meeting's closed session. I think there was one case in April. So I think board members have contacted staff if they have technical questions and legal counsel for legal questions. So as of right now, it's working just fine. Thank you for asking.
That's great to hear.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. What a
I just want to clarify what Ms. Monterrubio said about it coming to the board in November for approval. We'll start the rulemaking process because it will have to be updated through regulation.
Thank you for reminding us of that. Appreciate it. Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
I do.
Yes.
This is just for taking up later. There have been a couple things at this meeting that we've talked about that we'd really like the enforcement committee maybe to take a look at. And I understand that it might not be right away. But now I'm blocking.
Have to do with the custody hearings, anything? Oh, custody,
Something from yesterday.
yeah, the custody.
To the,
Letters.
Oh,
the letters.
Yeah, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Good memory. To review the letters that do go out, the form letters that do go out, and,
And also, weren't we looking at the, probation monitors hours as well?
yes.
Yes, that was
Yes.
a question that came up.
Anything?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the
Thank
data about unduplicated numbers of complaints.
Right. And that's just a reporting thing, right? The unduplicated, but, yeah,
Thank you all very much.
thank you.
Okay, any other concerns, comments, questions? Okay, may I have a motion, well, no, I move that the board accepts the Enforcement Committee report.
Second?
Okay, it has been moved and, any other questions? It has been moved and seconded, and we'll go for the vote. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just moving right along here. Call for the vote.
Corvidue.
Yes.
Bernal. Erickson.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Horn.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Phillips.
Aye.
Passes.
Well, thank you very much. We're working hard on those disciplinary guidelines. Oh, yeah. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the president's report. He had to leave early, no. So if you'll turn to item number 19 in your books, there is a listing here of the dates of upcoming meetings for a variety of different things, board meetings, outside board events, and different committee meetings. It should be noted that the Policy and Advocacy Committee meeting, if you're looking at an older version of the calendar on July 7th has been taken off calendar, and another one will be eventually put back in its place. I did want to talk about committees for a moment, and that is that there has been a new committee appointment because we have a new board member. Yay! We've been waiting for you for a long time. And that is, Mr. Fu has joined us, has graciously agreed to go onto the licensing committee. So he will be joining us in our trip down the pathways to licensure.
Do you still feel that way?
Well, we're happy to have you, and thank you very much for accepting that appointment. So that appointment will be effective as of today. What else did I have to include in my team? Let me see what I put in my notes. I think that's, Oh, yeah, we're still working on the teleconference board meeting. I think we're still going through the polling process. I think most of the board members have participated at this point. So it might be worth looking at that.
Oh, the poll ended and it's August 9th, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m.
Okay, so August 9th, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. I think the only problem we had was Ms. Monterrubio would not be able to join us that day. Okay, so mark it on your calendars. Perhaps you can send out a reminder to us all so we do put it on our calendars. You know, I think this has been a very productive meeting, and I'm really proud of us for the amount of stuff that we got through. And as always, I feel like this board really gives serious consideration to everything before it, those that have things that happen in closed session and things that happen in open session. And it's an honor to be part of this board. Item number 20, legislative items for future meeting. Are there any legislative items people would like to bring up that they would like to have agendized for future meeting? And we have no members of the public, do we? We have staff.
Yeah, I just think, I mean, and we don't have to repeat them now, I think that the conversation yesterday morning, the things that just were mentioned, I think would be a part of them, and I know that we talked about this notion of Breeze, the whole capabilities of that at some point, because I don't know if we're gonna all get to Sacramento to be able to do, a few-hour training. I feel like there might be a way for us to see that as a board at some point, to see the capabilities of, and so that would help us understand what's happening. I know that Dr. Horn mentioned that you would do that at licensing. I just feel like, much like those letters, at some point, it'd be good for us all to know what the interface people feel or face when they go onto Breeze.
People should also be aware that to the extent that issues have been brought up for the Enforcement Committee, which Madam Chair will be discussing with staff in our meeting in July, the next Enforcement Committee meeting is going to be October. So it will not be coming before the next board meeting. It will be coming to the final board meeting of the year. Public comments on items not on the agenda and recommendations of agenda items for future board meetings. As the public makes stampedes for the microphone. We have no we have no public members left. Okay, so item number 22, recommendations for agenda items for future board meetings beyond those that we've already discussed.
Really quick, I just wanted to let the board know that at the September meeting, I have extended an invitation for the Health Professions Education Foundation to give their annual report on the health of the fund and a little bit about the program. So that will continue to be an annual presentation from the loan repayment program.
Great. Okay, well, I think that concludes the agenda for today. As always, both the staff in the room and the staff outside the room, we're so very grateful, and we know how much work goes into preparing for these board meetings, and how relieved you must be on Saturday morning when you realize you don't have enough board meeting for another 3 months. But we really appreciate all the effort and skill and application of thought that goes into preparing us for these board meetings and preparing us to be board members. Thank you very much. And do we need a motion to close? Would somebody like to motion to?
Move to adjourn.
You're getting the hang of this really fast. Is there any discussion?
Food, Jones.
It was Ms. Jones, yeah. Do you want to go ahead and call the roll? I guess we're voting. Apparently. Okay. Anybody that's against the idea of adjourning the meeting, you want to hang around here for longer? How about everybody that's in favor of closing the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, okay. The Board of Psychology, peace out. Okay.
He's out.